Hello, everyone, and welcome to the webcast. My name is Christine Dorsey Davis. I'm the Executive Director of the Ohio chapter of the American Planning Association, and I'm your webcast moderator. Today is Friday, August 21st, and we will hear the presentation, Planning for Utility Scale Solar Energy Facilities. For technical help during today's webcast, you can type your questions in the chat box found in the GoToWebinar tool panel. For your content questions related to the presentation, again, just type those in the chat box, and we will answer those at the end of the presentation during the Q&A. Coming up next on your screen is a list of our sponsoring APA chapters and divisions for 2020. Thanks to all of you guys for sponsoring us and making these webcasts possible and free to members. Today in particular, we are sponsored by the APA Virginia chapter. So thank you, APA Virginia, for pulling this group together and giving us this presentation today. Coming up next on your screen is a list of our most upcoming webcasts. We actually are booked all of our available Fridays throughout the rest of the year, and now we're booking Wednesdays. So be sure to keep an eye out. Head over to ohioplanning.org/planningwebcast, where you can register for all of our sessions. This is actually a screenshot of our webcast webpage, so you can see there's different tabs up at the top. Our prior webcast tabs, that's where we post PDF copies of all of our presentations, so you can head over there for those. And we do have some distance education, some on-demand sessions available for credit through the end of this year, an ethics, a law, actually I think 2 ethics now maybe, and a law, and a general session. So head over there if you need to get those. ohioplanning.org/planningwebcast. Today's session has been approved for 1.5 CM credits for live viewing. Head over to planning.org, log into your MyAPA account, and search either by today's title or event number, both of which can be found on our webcast webpage. Like us on Facebook, Planning Webcast Series, to receive up-to-date information on our sessions. This is where I post if we have a change in date or time for a session, or if we have new sessions available for you to register. And then finally, head over to YouTube and search Planning Webcast, and we'll pop up subscribe to our channel. We have over 300 videos, over 3,000 subscribers. We record all of our sessions and post them there. So be sure to subscribe to us so that you get notifications when we post new sessions. That is the end of my intro. So I am now going to turn it over to Darren to do some introductions and to kick everything off. Darren, I just sent those controls over to you. You are good to go.
All right, well, hello everybody. This is the solar team of the Berkeley Group. Let's see, show my screen. Is it showing? Here we go.
Perfect.
All right. This is the solar team of the Berkeley Group. I'm Darren Coffey, co-founder and principal of the Berkeley Group. I've been in local government for 25 years, most of that in planning. I got my master's degree from Rutgers University in geography, and my bachelor's from James Madison University in economics and geography, and I've been an AICP planner since 2000.
Hi, I'm Denise Nelson. I'm an environmental engineer with the Berkeley Group. I have 16 years experience in Ohio and across the globe. I focus on sustainable development, resilient infrastructure, and solar. I earned my degrees from Virginia Tech and the University of Cincinnati.
I'm Rebecca Cobb. I'm a planner with the Berkeley Group, and I've worked with many localities updating comprehensive plans, zoning ordinances, subdivision ordinances. I have a degree from Longwood University in biology and environmental science.
So with that, we are going to hide ourselves and then get started with the presentation. That's us. You just saw us live. And this presentation will be made available very shortly after it's given. It is being recorded. So this webinar is associated with the Planning Advisory Service memo by the same title that was issued last September, October. And we'll present basically 3 topics and then have a good amount of time, maybe 15, 20 minutes at the end for questions and answers. So it's going to be a quick introduction to the solar industry, Then Denise is going to talk about land use impacts and recommendations. And then Rebecca is going to drill a little bit deeper down and talk about some policy issues and recommendations. Our learning objectives, so that we can all get our CM credits for this hour and a half, are to see how local and state governments are classifying utility scale solar generation and storage facilities, to identify key parameters to analyze for land use impacts and develop conditions to mitigate impacts, and to identify language to incorporate into comprehensive and general plans, as well as zoning ordinances to guide evaluation of proposed projects. So we're going to start with an overall introduction to the solar industry. Solar voltaics, or PVs, are the fastest growing energy source in the world due to the decreasing cost per kilowatt hour and the comparative speed in installing the panels. Most projects we've seen take between 12 and 18 months to get up. Today's presentation will focus on PV panels and not the other types of solar energy generation. The cost of solar technology has decreased by 80% since 2010, so the last decade. Transitioning from coal plants to solar significantly decreases carbon dioxide emissions and eliminates sulfur, nitrous oxides, and mercury emissions. The U.S. Department of Energy states, as the cleanest domestic energy source available, solar supports broader national priorities, including national security, economic growth, climate change mitigation, and job creation. PV installations are easily scalable. You can use panels to supply energy on site to your home or business, or you can use panels as part of your public energy utility. Utility scale solar, or commonly known as solar farms, is an energy generation facility that supplies power to the grid. These facilities are generally more than 2 acres in size and have capacities in excess of 1 megawatt. Today's utility scale solar facilities may encompass hundreds or even thousands of acres. Utility scale solar installations are the most cost-effective solar PV option. Utility scales, oh, well, there's my first glitch. Utility scale solar facilities typically include the PV panels, inverters, a substation, a switch yard, and a generator lead line, or called a gen-tie line, to interconnect to a grid transmission line. They may include battery storage, and we could easily do another 90-minute session just on battery storage options, mitigating the hazards of energy storage, and other recommendations. That's a topic that has come up for us just this year, and it's very apparent to us that it's going to be an accessory to utility scale solar facilities on most applications moving forward. Some reliable information on utility scale solar facilities is available from these organizations. It includes the federal government, the Energy Information Administration, Solar Energy Industries Association, Energy Storage Association, and the North Carolina Clean Energy Technology Center, which we've found they have just a wealth of information and knowledge, and they're willing to share it. You will also appreciate these links when your citizens and other stakeholders start asking you questions about the information reported from other less reliable sources. So these are some good ones to go to get correct information. From 2008 to 2019, United States solar PV installations have grown from generating 1.2 gigawatts to 30 gigawatts, according to the Solar Energy Industries Association. This map shows the installed solar PV capacity by state, with the darkest blue representing greater than 25,000 megawatts. And the top 10 states are listed. The demand for clean energy from the private sector continues to grow. Businesses are recognizing that going green is a smart business move for saving money and for marketing. This results in increased industrial efficiency, transparent reporting, and green labels. These are 100 companies that have agreed to go 100% green energy. The demand for clean energy from the public sector is also growing. State and local governments across the country are developing climate action plans and setting goals to both mitigate the impacts of climate change and to reduce the generation of greenhouse gases. The increased use of solar energy is a key component to many of these action plans. These states have adopted 100% clean energy legislation or have executive orders with either a goal or a mandate. Rhode Island is targeting 100% renewable by 2030, Connecticut and New York by 2040, Washington, New Mexico, Hawaii, and California by 2045, and Colorado, Virginia, New Jersey, Maine, Wisconsin, and Nevada by 2050. Oregon, Vermont, and Maryland have also made significant clean energy commitments, but not 100%. We mentioned that Virginia has legislation to have 100% renewable energy by 2050. Over the last 6 years, Virginia has seen a dramatic increase in its installed solar capacity, growing from 17 megawatts in 2014 to more than 470 megawatts installed by 2020, so just 6 years. Commonwealth's southern location and geography make it a great state for installing solar power. In addition, state mandated incentives and tax exemptions have favored solar development. The 2018 Virginia Energy Plan called for 3,000 megawatts of solar and onshore wind to be deployed by 2022 and a total of 5,500 megawatts by 2028. New legislation this year required our 2 energy providers to also construct or acquire a total of 3,100 megawatts of energy storage capacity. Virginia has embarked on a period of accelerated renewable energy development. That's what led us to becoming experts in this field. We need to go from 470 megawatts to 3,000 megawatts in 2 years. The state has permitted 1,720 megawatts and received notices of intent for an additional 3,695 megawatts. So this will increase the obligations of local governments and state agencies tasked with land use, permitting, and environmental decision-making. These mandates and incentives have accelerated the energy industry's efforts to bring facilities online as quickly as possible. The majority of these utility-scale solar facilities are handled at the local level. This has created a new challenge for local governments, as many are still unprepared to properly consider this unique land use option. Many localities are struggling to determine how to evaluate utility-scale solar facility applications. And I'll just, as a point of emphasis, the rest of this presentation, as good as solar is for energy and clean energy and green goals, its land use implications are significant. So with that, I'll hand it over to Denise Nelson to discuss how localities should properly evaluate the overall impacts of large-scale energy land uses on the community.
Thank you, Darren. With the growing demand for utility-scale solar, we need to be proactive and prepared to consider this new land use in a reasonable manner. I'll talk about land use considerations and provide a few recommendations for mitigating the impacts.
It's not advancing.
Try right-clicking your mouse and hitting next. Sometimes it gets stuck. Trick of the trade, everybody. Give it a whirl.
Yeah.
Next is at the top.
Next. All right.
And then it should be fine after that.
All right. Thank you very
Take notes,
much.
everyone. These are my tricks.
I just wanted to take a pause and have you really consider what I was just saying. It's important to reiterate what Darren said. Solar developers work at the local level. They identify potential sites, contact landowners, and prepare development applications. Sometimes they do all of this before notifying the local government. By the time they notify the local government, they've likely already notified the Regional Power Transmission Organization. On the East Coast, PJM coordinates electricity in 13 states and DC. Notifying PJM gets the project in the long queue for a power study that may not happen for another 3 to 4 years. Also, by the time they notify the local government, they've likely already made an agreement with the landowner for a lease or sale of the property. That means that when they submit the land use application, there's already at least one constituent supporting the project. When they do submit the application, the local government must evaluate numerous potential impacts, as they would for any other land use application. We're going to talk about each item listed here one by one. Changes in land use. Utility scale solar facility proposals must be carefully evaluated regarding the conversion of agricultural, forested, or residential land to an industrial scale use. These projects typically have a 35 to 40-year lifespan and a plan for decommissioning and removal at the end of the life. Agricultural and forested areas are typical targets for these facilities. Consider the effort to prepare the site for the solar facility, and then later, the effort to return the site to its previous land use at the end of the facility's life. The site would likely have been graded, and high-quality topsoil could have been lost. The prolonged maintenance of solar-friendly ground cover could change the characteristics of the soil, making the return to an agricultural use more difficult. Developers typically propose removing equipment to 3 feet below surface, leaving deeper footers, posts, and wires that may be a problem for agricultural equipment. And of course, site restoration to a forest takes quite some time to regrow. Utility scale solar can take up valuable future residential, commercial, or industrial growth land. Replacing agricultural uses with residential uses is a more typical land use planning concern, and in some areas is anticipated and desired over time. Land near existing infrastructure, typical of cities, towns, and villages, is a logical location for future residential and commercial uses and should be reserved for those uses. In many rural areas, industrial zoned land is limited, and local governments place a premium on industries that create and retain well-paying jobs. Solar facilities are a poor choice for these lands, as they take up quite a bit of land and generate few jobs. The location of utility scale solar facilities is the single most important factor in evaluating an application due to the large amount of land required and the extended period the land is dedicated to this singular use. Locations to avoid: save designated growth areas for residential, commercial, and industrial uses. Preserve prime agricultural land as a valuable resource for now and in the future. Preserve and buffer ecologically sensitive sites, such as wetlands and special habitats. Protect historical, cultural, and recreational sites. For example, the map here identifies some of Virginia's historic battlefields in cyan and yellow to indicate where development is not permitted. Finally, recognize that facilities proposed adjacent to corporate boundaries, residences, and public rights of way are likely to be more controversial. Locations to consider. Consider invisible areas where equipment is difficult to detect, the prior use of the land has been marginal, or there is no designated future use specified. Consider sites that have few use options, such as contaminated sites or capped landfills. These may be good candidates if managed properly. Consider locations near transmission lines. These are desirable because they require less new transmission infrastructure, which is infrastructure that is pretty hard to hide or screen. This map shows solar panels in dark blue on a site chosen because it includes the intersection of 2 transmission lines shown in red. Size. The size will impact the community in many ways. In Virginia, we've seen utility scale solar facilities ranging from 2 to 500 megawatts. A rough rule of thumb is that 1 megawatt requires approximately 10 acres of total project area, including setbacks and other undeveloped areas. That means we're talking about projects that cover 20 acres, about the size of the White House complex, to 5,000 acres, which is larger than the National Mall. And if Virginia meets our goal, our 2028 goal of 5,500 megawatts with only solar PVs, that will require 55,000 acres, an area larger than all of Washington, D.C. Any large-scale, homogeneous land use should be carefully examined, whether it's rooftops, pavement, or solar panels. They can change the character of the area and alter the natural and historic development patterns in a community. Large projects also create significant changes to surface water flows and wildlife patterns, and they may be hard to screen. In addition, consider how the size will impact construction. It can be quite difficult to manage erosion and sediment control and stormwater runoff if 5,000 acres is cleared all at once. We're also concerned that rural communities don't have the capacity to enforce erosion and stormwater regulations at large project scales. It is hard to imagine land uses as large as utility scale solar facilities. Concentration of facilities. One solar facility in a given geographic area may be an acceptable use of the land, but when multiple facilities are attracted to the same geography for the same reasons, this tips the land use balance too much towards a single use. Greensville County, Virginia, near the North Carolina border, decided to limit the size of solar projects to around 1,000 acres. But what do you do when developers propose 2 smaller projects instead of 1 large project? I'd like to share 4 of the 6 projects in Greensville County that form the 2 clusters shown here. Before the county settled on the 1,000 acre guideline, they approved the Sadler Solar Facility in the southwestern portion of the county, shown with the black panels, for 100 megawatts on 1,500 acres, just south of the Meherrin River. Later, they approved the Brunswick Solar Facility, shown with the blue panels, for 150 megawatts on 1,500 acres, north of the Meherrin River. Both sites were agricultural. These sites were selected and approved based on their proximity to the transmission line in red, the proximity to industrial sites to the north, and the general lack of future plans in the area. Take note that now there are 3,000 acres of land approved for solar surrounding and draining to the Meherrin River. There was heavy consideration here about the impacts of grading, runoff controls, wildlife corridors, and surface water quality. If the river had a narrower floodplain, more recreational use, or a scenic river designation, both projects may not have been approved. In the center of the county, the Meherrin Solar Facility, the blue panels on the right, was approved for 60 megawatts on 900 non-contiguous acres crossing a local road. Then, the Fountain Creek Solar Facility, the black panels to the left, was proposed for 80 megawatts on 800 acres right next door. This application is still under review. See the yellow dot in the middle? That represents the one parcel that separates the 2 projects. It is 600 feet wide. Both sites were agricultural. These sites were selected based on their proximity to an existing substation and the transmission line shown in red. The Meherrin Solar Facility in blue was the first project proposed in the county and was approved with no standardized county policies, including no expiration date on the approval should construction not begin within a reasonable time. The Fountain Creek facility, the one in black, was proposed after the county standardized policies and included detailed conditions. Most people in the county prefer the Fountain Creek proposal because it's confined to one parcel and it has existing trees at the perimeter for screening. However, now if both projects are constructed, the county will have 1,700 acres of disconnected parcels, providing a concentration of solar in the area. The blue lines shown are local roads. The parcels here are zoned agricultural and rural residential. There are houses along these roads, and citizens have concerns about the impact to views and wildlife corridors. The visual impact of utility-scale solar facilities can be significantly minimized with effective buffering and screening. Buffering and screening may be appropriate along any public right-of-way when the site is adjacent to another land use, such as residential. This is more challenging in historic or scenic landscapes. Solar facilities adjacent to historic corridors or scenic byways may negatively impact the rural aesthetic that exists along these transportation routes. While fencing and berms can provide an effective screen, vegetative buffers may be more appropriate in agricultural zoning. This figure shows a rendering of vegetation planted during project construction and the projected growth after 6 years. Typically, a mix of plants are specified to provide effective screening. Keep in mind that the panels will likely tilt throughout the day and not stay flat as shown. We typically recommend a maximum height for the panels to minimize visual impacts, but we always balance this against the need for additional grading. Environmental impacts. Converting farms and forests to solar facilities may reduce wildlife mobility. The arrangement of panels within a project site should allow for wildlife corridors. Perimeter fencing restricts wildlife movement, so we recommend fencing around solar panel bays that leaves pathways open for wildlife travel along wetland buffers and other undeveloped areas. The site disturbance required for utility-scale solar facilities is significant due to the size of the facilities and the infrastructure needed to operate them. The selection of panels and the arrangement on site should be optimized to minimize grading. The impervious nature of the panels themselves creates stormwater runoff that must be properly controlled, managed, and maintained. We recommend limiting the height of the panel's lowest edge to 10 feet above grade to minimize scour. These projects require the submission of both stormwater and erosion and sediment control plans to comply with federal and state environmental regulations. Rural and agricultural localities may not have the capacity or expertise to review plans for such large projects. In that case, we recommend having the plans reviewed by a licensed third party at the expense of the applicant. We've also seen the local government ask the applicant to pay for an independent contractor to complete all required site inspections during construction. Decommissioning. In addition to the upfront land use impacts relative to location, buffers, and the other considerations we've discussed, the proper decommissioning and removal of equipment and other restoration when the facility is no longer operational presents significant challenges to localities. In addition to requiring complete removal of equipment, supports, and wires, consider who is going to pay for the removal and site restoration. We require applicants to submit a decommissioning plan, cost estimate, and security. Decommissioning can cost millions of dollars. The industry suggests that there is a salvage value to the solar arrays, but there may or may not be a market for salvaging the equipment in 35 to 40 years. So we recommend leaving salvage value out of the decommissioning cost. Providing an adequate security to ensure the financial resources are available when needed is another significant challenge. Cash escrow is the most reliable security for a locality, but it is the most expensive for the industry and could be a deal breaker. Insurance bonds or letters of credit seem to be the most acceptable forms of security for the industry, but they can be difficult to enforce as a practical matter. In addition, the impact of inflation over decades is difficult to calculate. Therefore, the posted financial security should be reevaluated periodically. We usually recommend every 5 years. The worst possible outcome for a community and the landowner would be an abandoned utility scale solar facility with no resources available to pay for its removal. Fiscal impact. The sources of revenue for the locality may include real estate tax, machinery and tools tax, sales tax on local purchases, and proffers, but proffers can only be used in a rezoning situation. You'll need to look at the applicable federal and state financial incentives for solar. The intent of these incentives is to act as an economic catalyst to encourage the development of green energy. An unintended consequence is that the solar industry is saving money on local taxes, and the localities are not getting the full tax revenue. For example, in Virginia, solar equipment is 80% exempt from machinery and tools tax, and for projects larger than 25 megawatts, the real estate tax rate is used instead of the M&T tax rate. Also, all solar and wind equipment are 100% exempt from sales tax through June 2027. The project may create local jobs during construction, or imported construction employees will need housing, food, and entertainment. The positive fiscal impact to landowners with leases or the sale of property for these facilities is clear. The fiscal impact to the community as a whole is less clear, and in many of the localities, negligible compared to the overall budget due to the tax credits, low long-term job creation, and other factors. It's worth noting that the impact of these facilities is typically negligible on neighboring property values. While this may be a concern of adjacent residences, negative impacts to the property values are rarely demonstrated and are usually directly addressed by applicants as part of their project submittal. If you'd like to talk in terms of actual dollars, I'll share a project example. A solar facility proposed on 1,500 acres in Virginia will generate 75 megawatts of electricity. The capital cost is about $150 million. The project will create approximately 200 jobs during the 12 to 18-month construction phase. It is anticipated that the real estate tax will be $36,000 in the first year. This will increase over time with appreciation. The anticipated machinery and tools tax will be $140,000 in the first year. This increases after years 5 and 10 when the Virginia tax incentive decreases, but the overall value will steadily decline due to depreciation. The applicant has offered to make voluntary payments of $50,000 for each of the first 15 years to boost local government capacity. That totals $226,000 in the first year and a cumulative $6.5 million over 35 years. Public concerns. At the public hearing for a project, you'll hear from those who support the project and those against it. The landowner is a constituent, citing his individual property rights. He's likely had several conversations with the developer about the project and has gotten educated on the technologies. He is motivated by selling or leasing the land. He also feels good about using his land to meet the established regional and state clean energy goals. The landowner stands to make a considerable amount of money from leasing or selling the land, and their neighbors don't stand to make any money. This can make public hearings quite controversial. The willingness of landowners to cooperate with energy companies is understandable, but that does not automatically translate into good planning for the community. The short-term gain for individual landowners can have a lasting negative impact on the larger community. The neighbors and other constituents might not know much about solar facilities. The planning staff, commissioners, supervisors, citizens are likely hearing about solar or this specific project for the first time, and they're feeling overwhelmed. Without the background information on the project or technology, they may fear change in the community. They have questions about the negative impacts: pollution, noise, impacted views, grading, land conservation, conversion, and more. It doesn't help that there is that false information floating around on the internet. I've seen people on both sides talking about the long agricultural history and the generations of family members involved in the community. I've seen celebrities and wealthy residents make appearances. I've seen families argue among family members on both sides of the topic. At that point, everyone is emotional and policy may be forgotten. You must remember, it must be a fair process and resolution. It must be the right project in the right place. If you expect to see solar facility proposals, we recommend starting stakeholder engagement early. Before there's a specific project in mind or a public hearing scheduled, conduct educational sessions, community workshops, solar facility tours. Point your colleagues to this webinar or the associated memo. Be sure to engage all the different types of stakeholders: residents and landowners, local government staff and all the different departments, the planning commission and the governing body, the solar developer, the energy utility, and the permitting agency. We can learn a lot from all these perspectives. We held a community workshop in Greensville County to provide information, but more importantly, to get participants to talk about their concerns. We invited residents, absentee landowners, county staff, and elected officials. Somehow a few developers caught wind and joined us also. We mixed up the groups of people at different tables for small group discussions to promote group work and develop useful outcomes. We posed these questions. What do you think are the top opportunities with solar? What do you think are the top challenges? What should be the county's vision for solar? What goals will help implement that vision? We gave the groups 15 to 20 minutes to discuss and take notes on each question before reporting out to the larger group. The attendees walked away feeling educated and proud of their effort to help shape local policy. We compiled the results for the planning department to keep as a reference. They liked having something they could point to when saying they were acting in tune with community values. When an application did come in, staff, the planning commission, and attendees at the public hearing made reference to this workshop. Once we understand all of these issues and develop acceptable mitigation measures, we need to put these in writing in local plans, ordinances, and other policies, so we are clear and transparent on how we will evaluate new development applications. Rebecca is going to go into more detail on policy options.
Thank you, Denise. So in the next segment, we're going to talk about some policy issues and get into some specific recommendations. Specifically, we're going to go over state requirements. We're also going to talk about comprehensive or general plans and zoning ordinances and what should go in those, as well as some recommendations for use permits, as well as other agreements. This map you saw earlier shows the states and what has been installed in each of the states. And as you can tell from the map, each state is very different. And this also means that there's going to be various levels of regulation, various incentives, and various goals for carbon reduction. As an example, Virginia this year passed legislation allowing local governments to negotiate more revenue from solar developments. It also passed regulations about referencing national codes and standards. Also in Virginia, the Virginia Department of Environmental Quality allows permits by rule, or PBRs, for facilities up to 150 megawatts. And part of this process, after initiating that they want a permit through the PBR, is to show that they have local government approval. So let's take a look at what local government approval might look like. It's like any other land use permit, which usually starts with planning department review and then giving that information to the planning commission, who holds a public hearing and then makes a recommendation to the governing body, who would also hold a public hearing and make a final determination. The problem is that many localities don't have anything adopted regarding solar. So maybe your comprehensive plan and your zoning ordinance is mute on whether solar is allowed or not. Or some localities have adopted model ordinances, which are now outdated and don't incorporate lessons learned. So let's take a look at the comprehensive plan and what needs to be the steps for that. So first you want to review it. Does it address solar? Does it address solar adequately? Most comprehensive plans address industry and what types of industry are desired for the community, but there's also importance placed on agriculture operations, historic or scenic rural landscape features. There's also usually points to a desire for strong economy and job creation. So if the plan is silent on solar, this may act as a barrier for approving the use. Plans should make clear whether utility scale solar is desired, and if so, under what circumstances. Specific direction should be given in terms of policy objectives, such as appropriate locations and conditions. If your community does not desire such large-scale land uses due to their impacts on ag, forestry, or other concerns, then that should be directly addressed in your plan. Basically, all of the things that Denise went through, if those things were triggering something in your mind for your community, then that is what you want to address in your comprehensive or general plan. In Virginia, we also have a 2232 review. That's a state code that asks, is the project in accord with your plan? And it's another reason to make sure your plan specifically addresses solar. So once you've reviewed your plan and you're ready to start amending, some things that you need to consider are, you want to acknowledge your state's goals in your plan. You also want to acknowledge that this is an industrial scale land use that occupies significant acreage, but does not come with the same benefits. You want to address the preferred locations for solar, such as maybe agriculture, brownfields, landfills, also near transmission lines. You want to address areas to avoid, such as prime farmland, forest, or development areas. You can also indicate distances from cities and towns, such as saying 2 miles away from such sites. You also want to consider proximity to historic resources, environmentally sensitive areas, and scenic view sheds. Again, this can be a proximity, just something general, or something specific, such as a number of miles away from a specific site. Once you've amended the text of the comprehensive plan, maps are always very helpful. And a lot of maps might be already in your plan that you can utilize, such as prime farmlands, scenic view sheds or floodplains, or a map of historic sites. Other things you might want to include are transmission lines, transfer stations, or if you've already got solar facilities, you want to indicate those through maps. Many localities decide to do a map like it's shown on the right, which indicates in red all of the areas that they would not want to see applications for utility scale solar, and the areas in green where they would entertain applications. Now looking at your zoning ordinance. Again, you want to do the same thing as you've done with your comprehensive plan. Does it address solar? Does it address solar adequately? And one of the first things to start editing is the definitions. You should define small, medium, and utility scale definitions, as well as zoning districts and whether there should be permitted uses, or if this is conditional, and then what should be in your conditional permit. So as I mentioned, we define small scale, medium scale, and utility scale as part of our definitions. Other definitions to include would be battery storage. That's something that has been mentioned we're seeing a lot of, as well as decommissioning, project site. Any terms that are new and specific to solar facilities, you want to make sure are defined in your ordinance. While amending the ordinance, we suggest you place this as a separate article or separate section of your ordinance. This makes it easier for staff, the public, and potential applicants to find the information. The article should include a statement of intent that outlines the purpose. Often this reads something like, to establish requirements for construction and operation, and to provide standards for the placement, design, construction, and removal of solar facilities. It also addresses public safety and minimizes impacts. The applicability should also be addressed and should apply to all solar facilities constructed after the effective date of the article, and include any physical modifications to any existing solar facilities that materially alter the type, configuration, or size of such facilities or other equipment. So those are some specific statements that can be added to your ordinance. The solar article should also include your application and procedure requirements. Pre-application meetings are something that we highly recommend. A pre-application meeting gives staff the opportunity to learn about the site and request any particulars. For example, the picture to your right, that site backs up to several dwellings, and most of the site has a natural buffer and a few locations did not. These concerns can be pointed out during a pre-application meeting, and the applicant can consider additional setback distance, planting buffers, and also the locality, as the locality, you can request visual simulations of these areas. In addition to pre-application meetings, you want to check for matching your comprehensive plan. You want a permit application, a concept plan, and concept plan compliance. And thinking of mitigating impacts, you want a traffic study, construction study, and then inventories of surface water, environmental features, and other visual impacts. You also want a neighborhood meeting. As Denise mentioned, many times people are unaware of what solar facilities are. A neighborhood meeting gives those in the neighborhood time to learn about solar facilities and about the specific site and have questions answered. You also want the decommissioning plan to be supplied with procedures for removal of infrastructure, as well as for seeding and tree planting, and how the final site will be left, as well as cost estimates and the schedule for updating those cost estimates and other elements of the plan. Decommissioning also needs to supply a security. This could be an escrow, a surety, a letter of credit. And as Denise mentioned, we recommend that you do not include salvage value for the decommissioning. If you include salvage value, it can leave the locality without any security for most of the life of the project. And you need to carefully consider that there will be upfront costs associated with decommissioning a facility, as well as values can change, and without proper decommissioning, much of value can be lost. Other security should also be provided for erosion and sediment control, as well as maintenance for fencing and landscaping. Another thing to consider is the application fee. One thing that has been mentioned as well is these are large sites, and so this is going to take a large amount of staff time, and that needs to be considered with the application fee. There may need to be third parties hired, and that should be the burden of the applicant. Also in the solar article, you want to develop some minimum development standards, and this is going to vary from locality to locality. So if you want maximum allowed acreage, this could mean anything from a few acres to 1,000 acres or more. You also want to consider distance to other solar facilities. We've seen many applications come in with facilities adjacent to one another. And so maybe you want to restrict that and say they have to be a certain distance apart, or that it's okay for them to be in close proximity as long as it's not over a certain amount of acreage. You also want to require setbacks. And so we suggest greater setbacks when properties have residential dwellings currently on them, and then less setbacks if there are no dwellings on the properties. We also recommend leaving room to increase this if need be as a mitigation in the conditions. Other minimum development standards include height. We recommend a max height of 15 feet and 10 feet as a max drip line. Buffer and screening should be included. You want to regulate the buffer within the ordinance, but again, leave room in your conditions to specify any specific plantings or things that might be necessary to mitigate that particular site. Fencing should be addressed. Some localities require 6 or 7 foot fences with 3 strands of barbed wire. If protecting wildlife is a priority for your community, you may want to consider something less than that. Our Department of Wildlife Resources recommends fences that are 5 feet or less without barbed wire for animals to traverse the area, or fences that are 8 feet or taller to discourage the animals from jumping the fence. Fences can also include large mesh at the bottom or pipe so that small animals can still navigate the site. Also, regardless of the fence, you do want to allow wildlife corridors. So the fence should not be one continuous fence that encircles the whole site, but there should be groups of panels that are fenced with breaks in between for wildlife corridors. Our Department of Wildlife Resources recommends that 40 acres is the maximum that should be clustered and fenced. Vegetation should be native to your area, and you get bonus points if you include pollinator species. Lighting should consider nuisance, and not just lighting during the daily operation of the site, but also the construction and decommissioning. Other conditions to consider are battery storage. This, like we've said previously, is a hot topic and is very up and coming. And so a couple of things that you might want to consider for battery storage would be 24/7 monitoring, as well as automated fire suppression. Another thing to require in your zoning ordinance is that the building permit be obtained within 24 to 36 months, depending on your locality and your state process. You want to allow enough time for the applicant to receive all permits that they need from the state, but you don't want the permit to stay open indefinitely. Also, you want to be notified of any change of ownership. You should know at all times who the appropriate contacts are for the site. For offsetting burdens, if your locality, like Virginia, just adopted that we can accept real property, cash payment, or construction of public improvements. And so you want to acknowledge that if that's something that you can do. And so that is some suggestions for your zoning ordinance. But then what about your use permit? So the use permit is going to be very unique in site to site. There are some things, that should be considered. And you want to look at each site and decide, what really needs to be mitigated here. Are the residences close by? Are there environmental features? How many wildlife corridors needs to be there? So those are the types of things you want to consider for your use permit. The use permit application, you want an application form, as well as to know the tax maps that this would be on, as well as an adjacent owners list. You also want to include a statement of intent and draft conditions with your use permit. The image on the right is an example of unique factors that needed to be mitigated and why it's good to supply general landscape requirements in the ordinance and then specify landscaping specific to the site for your conditional permit. So this site, because of its topography and its close proximity to a road, it would still be visual if the normal landscaping was used. And so in this case, the conditions allow the trees to be pushed closer right up against the panels to help block the view while people traveled the road. But so these are the types of nuances and things you need to consider for conditions in your use permit. The conditions should also cover the submittal of all the various plans, the operations of the facility, including noise and lighting standards. Again, these are things not just during the actual operations, but construction and decommissioning. You want to cover the buffers, as we've mentioned. Traffic is another important thing to cover. Again, it's very different during construction and decommissioning of the site. And so you may want trucks to follow a specific route. You may also want to require that they repair any road damages that occur during construction or decommissioning. Decommissioning should cover any triggers for the decommissioning, as well as depth of removal of equipment and the state to which the site would be restored. The form of security should be outlined for decommissioning, as well as the other plans that are submitted. Some localities request training for emergency personnel, and you'll want to specify how often that training should occur, as well as outline any emergency plans that must be submitted. And last but not least, violation of conditions. You want a condition that outlines the time frame for complying with violations, and if it's not complied, when and how the permit would be terminated. Other considerations. So again and again, we've talked about how large these sites can be, and we've talked about the environmental concerns with these. And so, these are going to be quite large plans, sometimes multiple plans, with a number of, control features that have to be reviewed and inspected. And so your staff may not have time for this. You may need to hire third parties, and that needs to be something that is paid for by the applicant, as well as you may want to consider limiting the clearing and grading. And so they are only working on one section at a time, and that section gets stabilized before they move to the next area. And that could help also with your staff if hiring a third party is not an option. If they're limiting the grading, then that may allow for easier inspections and inspection time. So a few examples of what we've seen and done in other localities. In Mecklenburg County, we received the 2019 Old Dominion Innovative Approaches Award from Virginia APA for the work we did with them. They were beginning to see a great interest from applicants in utility scale solar facilities. The county's long range plan did not address solar facilities. The zoning ordinance was based on an outdated state model. They approved one request, but then received more. And each request was for larger and larger facilities, and all concentrated near one town. The county decided it was time to initiate some new regulation. Discussion led to parameters in the comprehensive plan with standards limiting the concentration of facilities and establishing distances from corporate boundaries. The zoning ordinance was updated to define solar facilities and allow them only in specific districts. The solar industry had concerns that the purpose of the new regulations were to prevent the use. But since the changes, some requests have been denied, but most have been approved. The regulations and conditions are to evaluate applications and, if approved, mitigate impacts. Sussex is a county located further east and north from Mecklenburg. The interest there began with the announcement of the new Amazon headquarters in Arlington, Virginia. And so even though Sussex is 100 miles away, there was interest from Amazon to achieve some of their energy goals within that county. And so because of the interest, the county initiated changes to adopt changes to their comprehensive plan and their zoning ordinance. Like Mecklenburg, it was silent on solar previously. And so they used an expedited process and changed their comprehensive plan and their zoning ordinance within 1 month. This is not something that we recommend, but it worked for their community. Since the new regulations have been put into place, one new solar application has been received and is utilizing the new Virginia legislation for siting agreements. So our basic recommendations and action steps for planners would be: review your state requirements, know what your state allows, and check back annually because this is a rapid changing industry. Review and amend the plan and land use ordinances. These should align with how your community wants to regulate utility scale solar uses. Evaluate each application based on its own merits. The bottom line should never be who the applicant is, rather it should be whether the project's adverse impacts can be properly mitigated so that the impact to the community is positive. Consider capacity and fees. Remember, these facilities can be massive compared to other land uses. Localities need to proactively consider this demand to prevent unsurmountable cost and overworked staff. Learn from others. You're listening to this webinar, so that tells me you believe in learning from others, and we would encourage you to continue to learn from and lean on your colleagues. In conclusion, we've talked about the demand for utility scale solar, the impacts associated with these large scale uses, and community considerations. We've also touched on what you might hear from the public and specific ways to amend your land use documents. Finally, utility scale solar facilities can help meet sustainability goals without compromising a community's character and land use future. It's all about meeting the community's vision and objectives, locating the projects appropriately and sufficiently mitigating their impacts. So thank you for your time. I'll open it up for questions you might have for me and my colleagues, and I'll turn that over to Christine.
Okay, wonderful. So folks, again, you can type your questions in the chat box in the GoToWebinar tool panel, and we'll see how many of these we can get to in the next 25 minutes or so. If you want to go ahead and turn your webcam back on just so we can see your, oh, there you are. Hi, guys.
Here we go.
Okay. Okay, so please, again, don't raise your hand. That's not going to do anything. You have to type your questions in the chat box. Okay, we're going to start way back at the beginning, and not the beginning of your presentation, but just kind of the beginning of the purpose of solar, and ask you, hold on, I'm pulling the question up now because everything is shifting on me. If we could talk about the purpose of solar, why we want it, what the benefits are, talking about that kind of thing. If you could just kind of give an overview of that for folks that might not understand the value of solar.
Go for it.
Okay. You know, around the country, we're looking into a lot of different clean energy sources so that we're not reliant on coal and fossil fuels that provide abundant energy, but also provide a lot of pollution and contribute to climate change and illnesses in our communities, illnesses in our forests and our natural areas. So there's a lot of different alternative energy sources out there. Even within solar, as Darren mentioned, there's a lot of different types of ways for harnessing solar energy. We've just seen this industry grow so fast, especially driven by Virginia's policies and goals, that in addition to the growth of the technology, the price of the panels and the knowledge and expertise in the industry for installing the panels, you do generate quite a bit of power at a low cost for equipment and installation when you use solar.
And I would just add that, above that, you've got the issue of climate change and clean air, and they're correlated, and a lot of states are pushing solar as a primary green energy source to a lesser extent, depending on your geography, wind as well, just so that there's less reliance on coal and natural gas for power generation. There's also a certain independence from a national security perspective for doing that. So there's lots of great reasons for it. It's just that from a planning standpoint, there's a lot more potential for adverse impacts and a lot more moving parts. I mean, you're talking about applications that are, in boxes by the time it's all said and done, as opposed to, your normal hair salon or auto repair shop, CUP. It's just a lot of moving parts. And, back in the 80s and maybe early 90s, planners experienced something similar with cell towers. And, nobody wanted a cell tower in their backyard, but everybody wanted improved cell service. And they were very controversial, and planners hadn't dealt with them before. That it's similar to that, but those applications were a whole lot easier than these are.
Okay, thank you. Why do solar farms have a 35 to 40 year life expectancy? That seems really short. Can't the panels just be replaced and continue to operate for decades into the future? How does that work?
So that's a good question. I don't know why they tend to say 35 to 40 years, but that's what we typically see. I don't think that is short. That's 2 generations of occupying land, which if you do locate one of these things in an identified growth area, you're tying that growth area up for that period of time. We recently saw an application that started talking about a 45-year time horizon. And then the panels themselves, we're told, are good for 20 to 25 years. So, my assumption is that they're planning on, they're just tying the lease, and a lot of what we see is leases, not land purchases. They're tying up leases for 35 to 40 years. They can always extend those leases down the road. And at some point, at about midway to 60% through the project life, presumably they're going to be switching out the panels, which the industry doesn't talk a whole lot about that either, to my knowledge. So I'm not sure what the magic number is there, but that's what we have been dealing with for the 4 years or so that we've been doing this.
I think they started with the idea that the panels are under warranty for the first 20 to 25 years. And they wanted to ask for as long this time period as they could without making it sound permanent. And we've talked amongst ourselves, in 30 years and 40 years and 50 years, we don't know what the new technology is going to be. Instead of having 500 panels, can you just have one panel that generates the same amount of power?
Yeah, and then, in North Carolina, they've been dealing with this for 10, 15 years, but the facilities that they've seen, and it's across the state, particularly the middle of the state east, 10 acres, 20 acres, 50 acres, a big one would be 100 acres. What we've been seeing is, it started out with hundreds of acres, and now we're starting to talk about 500 megawatt facilities and larger. 5,000 acres, 6,000 acres. At one point, there were rumors going around about someone looking for 10 to 13,000 acres. You're talking about massive facilities that, are going to supposedly lock the land down for a generation or two. And yet, what is technology going to do in that amount of time? Are you going to need that much land? Are the panels going to be replaced because that technology is going to continue to evolve? Or is a cube about that size going to be powering every house? We just don't know. So from a planning standpoint, we're trying to make sure that if these uses are approved, they're done in a way that doesn't significantly negatively impact the character of the community. It's something the community can live with for the duration of that land use, and that when that land use ends, whether it's 20 years, 5 years, 40 years, 100 years, the community has a security that they have control over, so that if the company doesn't responsibly decommission, the community can cash out that security and do the decommissioning and return the land to approximation of its former state in a responsible manner. So you don't have any other land uses in planning that I've ever experienced where you've got to think 40 years out. It's unique.
Well, and the large developers set up a small local company, an LLC, to design and develop that property. And we're not sure how long that LLC will be around.
Okay. Definition question. PV panels, P as in Paul, V as in Victor, interchangeable with the word solar panels? Yes, they are.
Yes.
Okay. That was a question just from me. So follow up to that. Can you talk about heat island issues attributed to the land clearing and installation of panels?
Take it.
Yeah, sure.
All right. We've heard a couple of questions about that over time. We've seen studies from the North Carolina Solar Center down there. The panels are dark, but they are reflective, and they tilt throughout the day. So usually they're installed and then they have a ground cover. So the ground is still usually green and vegetative, which helps mitigate heat island impacts. But in North Carolina, they have found that at certain sites, certain conditions, they have seen an increase in heat a little bit around the border of the property, but nothing significant that we should be concerned about yet.
And to me, that's another great reason to require 100 or more feet of buffer, because sites that don't clear cut and they do leave the existing vegetation, if there is existing vegetation, or if it was an open field or pasture, they plant a nice healthy 3 or 4 staggered landscape in there and keep it maintained. Then you're talking about there is no impact beyond the project site.
Okay.
I'll also say, I don't know if there's going to be a question about wells or not, but apparently that's a big deal out west, because out west the panels get dusty because it's dry, and so the projects need to have wells, and that can affect the aquifer because you're using water to clean the panels. It's already a precious resource. Wells east of the Mississippi are a whole lot more common, and we've only seen it once on one project in Virginia where they proposed a well or a series of wells. It was controversial. The neighbors wanted to know what it was going to do to their wells. I think the applicant was, it wasn't our project, so I don't know, but I think they were finally advised that they wouldn't need that because rain washes the panels off in Virginia. And we have had 1 or 2 applicants that have raised the issue, that have thought about it. And we've said, they're California companies or whatever. And we've said, you don't want to go there. You're just going to bring up an issue that is going to be controversial, and you've got enough on your hands.
Okay. Man, we're getting some really good questions. Okay, next one. Are glare studies required for impact on aircraft or other uses? That's a good one.
Do you want to take that one, or you want me to?
No, I'm not sure.
So that was something that I looked into very early on in the research that we conducted. a lot of which is what the Planning Advisory Service memo is based on. And the bottom line is, if you're within a certain distance of a general aviation or other public or private airport, the FAA requires you to fill out a form, and I don't remember what the form number is, but it's in my research somewhere. If somebody's in Virginia and wants to know, but it's it's FAA, so it's anywhere in the country. There have been no studies shown, to my knowledge, that glare impacts aircraft in a negative manner. As a matter of fact, there are airports, major airports around the country that have either leased land for solar panels or are in the process of considering it. And certainly they wouldn't be doing that, and the FAA wouldn't be allowing them to do that, presumably, if there were any danger to aircraft from glare or reflections. And the panels, I think Denise mentioned, they do have an anti-glare coating, which I can only assume is effective because it really seems to be a non-issue. For our first client with regard to this, Mecklenburg County, that was one of the recommendations we had, is for it to be a certain distance from an airport. And they ended up not adopting that recommendation because actually one of the first ones that were proposed was adjacent to an airport, and they had already approved that one with no regulations, and they just simply weren't concerned about it. And none of our clients since then have been either. So
that's funny. It is important to talk to the neighbors. We found places where we say it's not a good idea to allow solar facilities within a mile of a town or a city because that town or city might want to grow. But then we've also talked to people in the city. In Virginia, cities are independent from their counties. We've talked to people in the cities that say, no, it's okay. You can put a solar farm there. That's fine. So same thing with FAA. Talk to the airports and just ask.
Okay, thank you. Next one. What has been the response of applicants when localities are requiring vegetative screening adjacent to panels? My experience is that the applicant is concerned about shadows falling on the panels. Can you speak to that?
yeah, you want to talk about the fence and the perimeter, project perimeter?
So yeah, we have found that it is important, for the neighborhood to not see a big ugly fence. So we do recommend that the fence is internal to the property, and so there can be some space if you're requiring enough setback. Then there can be some additional space to pull the trees away from the panels, but still have enough layers of trees to block the fence and the panels from the neighbors.
And they might be referring to the example that you showed. It was one of my projects where a roadway goes by the project site. The first area of the project site is wetlands. So they didn't want to disturb the wetlands to plant trees, but then the project site also sloped uphill, not steep enough to prevent installation of the panels, but they recognized that if they put the trees down low, you'd still be able to see the panels when you looked up. And so they came to us and recommended, they offered to put the trees a little closer to the panels to make sure you can't see them.
But it's still trees, fence, panels. So I would say there's at least 50 feet between the screening and the panels, if not more, because obviously the industry has that very concern.
And in the end, the applicant also doesn't want a bunch of angry neighbors, upset about seeing it. So they're willing usually to, put in the appropriate landscaping.
Okay, thank you. Next question. Would it be more efficient economically to incentivize individual property owners to install solar on their house or building, so on a micro scale, rather than building a large scale farm? And then the second piece of that, would the smaller kind of micro decentralized solar installations be more efficient in terms of less energy lost when transferring to the grid than a large centralized farm? So two-part question. First, economically, would it be best does it seem to be best to install on a smaller scale? And then secondly, in terms of the efficiency of the product, large scale versus small scale.
Right, absolutely. Well, on the projects we worked on, that's one of the reasons we define what is small, medium, and large. And Denise has asked to be able to address this one, so I'm going to let her take first crack, and then Rebecca and I will weigh in if she doesn't nail it.
Well, I have two major points I like to make when people ask this question, and I'll let you fill in all the other details. First, before we even get to solar, the number one most important thing we need to do is have energy efficiency. We can save so much energy if we get those projects put in place at home and businesses everywhere. And then second, when we go to solar panels, I'm a huge fan of rooftop solar, these small decentralized solar systems, because then everybody has their own power source. Everybody is involved and engaged and understands the power network, but also those generate a lot more green jobs, local jobs for people to install, to maintain, to keep up with that infrastructure. And those roofs are just there doing nothing. So we do have programs in the state that encourage and financially support rooftop solar and local government solar on top of schools and other facilities. It's just today we were talking about utility scale.
So yeah, from a land use standpoint, what Denise was just talking about is usually defined as small scale solar. And in every client we've had, we've recommended that they allow that in every zoning district by right. And it's just an accessory to the primary use. And then with businesses, we want businesses to be able to do the same thing. And depending on if you're a larger factory or a larger rooftop business, and you want to use your rooftop to put solar on it to power your facility, that might be a medium scale solar facility. And so we want those to be by right too in commercial and industrial zoning districts. So we feel like it's important to address those types of solar facilities or solar systems. Like everybody should have their own solar system in an ordinance, so that it's clear that that community is embracing solar and they're trying to encourage it, but do so in a responsible manner. Utility scale solar is a whole different issue. It's not really one or the other. We as individuals might investigate a small scale solar or a medium scale solar for our business. If we had an office, we would totally be into that, but we all work from home, so we're completely pandemic prepared in that regard. But utility scale solar is really about companies who want to sell energy to the grid. And these startups or these companies, these LLCs that are local, start out in California or Michigan or Kalamazoo or wherever. Some are in Virginia, they started in Virginia, but they very quickly, once they get approval, tend to turn the keys over to a power company. So in Virginia, that's Dominion Power or Appalachian Electric Power, AEP. So there's usually a power company right around the corner from one of these things. They do their own facilities, but they also have encouraged, and the state has incentivized these companies to take care of all the front end legwork and nail down the leases and get the local land uses and go through the PBR program and get all that done. And then they turn the keys over for a very healthy price and get paid, and then they're out of it, which is what makes all of those local land use conditions so very important to nail down, regardless who the owner of the facility is. So micro scale, absolutely. Macro scale, it's here and it's going to stay until technology replaces it.
You know, I have one more point on that. We talked about the Amazon facility that needs power and they want to get it from solar farms. There are a lot of companies on that 100 green power company list that have flat out said, you know, their corporate headquarters, they don't want to put solar panels on the roof. They don't want to even consider anything structural with the roof, with the technology and the maintenance of it. So they would prefer to basically buy it from the grid or to buy credits.
Okay. Related. here we go. Our municipality has its own electric department. We buy our electric off the grid and then resell it to the customers. An outside agency has interest in developing a site for solar and give a portion of the energy created. Is there anything we should look out for?
That's a unique one. There's everything you should look out for. You know, it probably would be best to have this discussion offline, one-on-one, just to learn more about the nuances of it. In Virginia, what we have seen and are used to are rural localities. But I have I've been contacted by one or two people after the memo was published last fall saying, hey, our city might be interested in entertaining some of these uses within our boundary because there's no kids going to the schools, and it kind of preserves land that we might want to have for rooftops in 20, 30, 40 years. But between now and then, we'd like to generate some revenue. So there's some unique situations around the country that we haven't seen in Virginia. I would be interested in learning more about this situation. It could be a great benefit to offsetting the cost to the city of generating that power, and it could be a boon to the local general fund, or if they set up an enterprise fund, it could be a great deal. But what you have to understand as a potential customer or client or partner is that these facilities apparently can generate a lot of money. And so you want to be sure you're getting your fair share if you're going to buy from them, or they're going to give to you, or you're going to partner with them. Some of the information that we are given from the industry isn't always as accurate as we would have liked for it to have been, which is why we very frequently require third-party verification of everything. Capital cost, decommissioning cost, salvage value, which we just typically recommend, who cares what it is, that's their problem, not the locality's problem. So trust but verify, or don't trust but verify. Either way, I would go in with eyes wide open.
Okay. I think I'm just looking for a quick question and I don't see one. Oh, real quick. There were a couple questions about battery storage. Let me try to find that one because I think that one might be kind of quick.
Or we could sign up for one of your Wednesdays.
Yeah, right. I think maybe that's what we need to do here.
It's, you know, but Denise has spent a good portion of 2020 on lockdown researching energy storage and developing a set of best practices to mitigate potential impacts for energy storage. Because whereas the one benefit of solar facilities is they can't go boom. They're pretty quiet and they don't generate light pollution. But when you add energy facilities in, they can go boom, and out west they have gone boom. And you have to assume at some point something's going to go wrong, and you need to be prepared from a public safety standpoint to minimize that impact. If there's a fire, when there is a fire, it's put out by a suppression system, et cetera, et cetera. So we've learned a lot this year on it. We'd be happy to share that information with anybody one-on-one or, you know, down the road.
I think we need a Wednesday to talk about storage and ways to make sure it doesn't go boom.
Do I?
We need a Wednesday on
Yes.
storage and how to make sure it doesn't go boom.
I heard Denise volunteer for that, so bless her.
Okay. Well, it's time's up. Thank you, Darren and Rebecca and Denise, for joining us today, and for the APA Virginia chapter for hosting this session. We appreciate it. Again, we have recorded it. It will go on our YouTube channel. Just search Planning Webcast on YouTube and it'll pop up. And a PDF copy has just been posted on our webcast webpage of this presentation. So just head over to ohioplanning.org/planningwebcast and you can download a PDF copy of it. So thank you again for joining us today, everybody, and have a great weekend. We'll talk next time. Thanks.
Thank you, Christine.
Bye.
Thank you. Have a great day.